My parents Thr-atened to ban me from my own birthday party if I didn't apologize for wearing a disrespectful dress. You look like a street girl, my aunt shouted. I stood my ground and they locked me out. The next morning, the internet exploded over my outfit that. It all started with the dress. I had been working tirelessly at my job as a fashion designer, building my brand, and pushing myself to be bolder and more creative. For my 25th birthday, I wanted something special. I didn't want a typical party with boring decorations and small talk. I wanted to celebrate who I had become, and I felt like a dress could encapsulate that. I designed a red slip dress. It wasn't flashy, but it was daring, a sharp contrast to the soft, pastel colors my parents adored. It made me feel beautiful, powerful, and strong. When I showed it to my mom the night before the party, her face dropped. I could see the disapproval in her eyes before she even spoke. "That's what you're wearing?" she asked, tone colder than I expected. I nodded. "Yeah, I thought it would be perfect for the party." "You're embarrassing yourself," my mom muttered under her breath, but I could hear her clearly. "That dress is inappropriate for a family event. It's disrespectful." I felt my heart sink. My mom had never been one to hold back, but this was different. I had anticipated some criticism, but nothing like this. I tried to explain, but she cut me off before I could get a word out. "You look like a street girl," my aunt, sitting on the couch, said in a sharp, dismissive tone. "Why do you always have to try so hard to stand out? You don't belong in that dress." I swallowed hard. It stung, but I wasn't about to back down. "It's my birthday, and I want to wear something that makes me feel good," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, if you don't apologize for that thing you're wearing, you won't be allowed at your own party tomorrow," my mom snapped. It wasn't the first time my mom had made me feel small, but this time felt different. This time, I had made something of myself. I had built a career I was proud of, and I wanted to share that with my family. I didn't want to let them control how I felt about myself anymore. "I'm not apologizing for wearing what I want," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. "You'll regret this," my mom said, her voice low and angry. "I'm not the one who's going to regret anything," I shot back. Before I knew it, they had locked me out. I stood in front of the door for what felt like hours, staring at the darkened windows of our house. I could hear my family inside, laughing and talking, but I wasn't allowed in. My phone buzzed repeatedly, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was the point? They had already made it clear where they stood. The night passed, and I stayed outside, pacing in the cold, trying to process what had just happened. At that moment, I felt a mix of anger, humiliation, and confusion. Was this really how they saw me? Was I really just the daughter who could never get anything right? The next morning, I woke up to a message from my best friend, Ava. "You're trending on Twitter. What happened last night?" I was confused at first, but then I opened Twitter and saw it, the photo. It was of me, standing in front of my house, arms crossed, clearly upset, wearing the red dress. The caption read, "When your family locks you out of your own birthday party because of your outfit." The post had gone viral. I sat there, frozen. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected anyone to care about what I was wearing. I didn't even know how the picture had been taken. But there it was, blowing up on social media. Within hours, people were sharing the photo, commenting about how terrible it was that my family had treated me this way. Some even started calling my mom and aunt out for their cruel behavior. I scrolled through the comments, reading what strangers had to say. Some people were calling my dress bold and beautiful, while others were mocking my family for their outdated views. A few celebrities even retweeted the post with words of support. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, locked out of my own house, on the receiving end of my family's cruelty, but somehow, the internet was on my side. I didn't hear from my family for hours. They were too ashamed to speak to me. I could tell. But then, my phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a message from my mom. "Rachel, Please, you don't understand. We didn't mean to hurt you, I deleted the message without responding. What was there to understand? They had hurt me, and now, they were trying to backpedal. It wasn't until later that day when things took a turn. A boutique I had been working with called me. Hi, Rachel, this is Sophia from the boutique. I just wanted to reach out and say how sorry we are for what happened to your family. I saw the photos online, and we'd love to feature you on our social media next week. How do you feel about being our brand ambassador? I was floored. The thought of being part of something so big, something that felt like it validated all my hard work and my identity, was almost too much to process. I'd been thinking about this moment for years, when my family would finally accept who I was. And now, the world was starting to. The days passed, and I continued to gain more support online. The outpouring of encouragement was overwhelming. I received messages from strangers, telling me how much my story had inspired them. How they too had been judged for their choices, their appearance, their lives, but seeing me stand up for myself had given them the courage to do the same. But still, my family didn't apologize. They sent me messages, calling me ungrateful and stubborn. They were embarrassed by the way they had treated me, but their pride wouldn't let them admit it. My aunt, who had been the loudest in criticizing me, finally reached out. I know we made a mistake, she said, voice soft on the phone. We didn't mean to hurt you. We were just concerned about what others would think. I didn't know how to respond. After everything that had happened, it felt like too little, too late. I think I've had enough, I said quietly. I don't need your approval. I found people who support me for who I am, not for who you want me to be. The conversation ended there, but I knew it was the last one I'd have with them. I had finally reached a point where I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need them to accept me. I had learned how to accept myself. I never went to my birthday party. But I did get the greatest gift of all, the freedom to be who I truly was, no apologies necessary. As the weeks went on, the online support didn't die down. In fact, it only grew. Strangers began sharing their own stories of family rejection, and they used my post as a symbol of defiance. It was surreal. It wasn't just about a dress anymore, it was about the larger issue of how people, especially women, are expected to fit into molds designed by others. It was about standing up for yourself when everyone around you told you to stay quiet, to be more respectable. The boutique I'd been working with kept their word. They featured me on their Instagram and even had me come in for a professional photo shoot. I wore my red slip dress during the shoot, and it felt like I was finally owning my story. Each photo was more than just a picture, it was a statement. The photographer, Sophia, had this way of making me feel seen, not just as a model, but as a woman who had struggled, fought, and finally came into her own. And every shot told that story. The viral nature of my story didn't go unnoticed. One morning, I woke up to an email from a well-known fashion magazine. They wanted to feature me in their next issue. We've been following your story and would love to do a profile on you, the editor wrote. Your strength, your courage, and your passion for fashion, it's something we believe needs to be shared with the world. I remember staring at the screen, trying to comprehend what was happening. I had spent so many years wondering if I would ever get the recognition I felt I deserved, but this was something else. This was more than just recognition. This was validation from the world. I had to pinch myself. Was this really happening? The photo shoot with the magazine was another life-changing moment. I felt like a completely different person from the one who had been locked out of her home weeks earlier. I looked in the mirror and saw someone confident, someone who had stepped into her own power. The woman in the red dress was unrecognizable, not just in appearance, but in spirit. But even with all this success, I couldn't ignore the feeling that lingered. My family had never reached out to apologize. They were still too proud, too stubborn. My mom sent me a message a few weeks after everything had settled down, and this time, it was more of a demand than an apology. Rachel, I think it's time we talked, she said. You can't keep ignoring us forever. I almost laughed. Was she serious? After everything that had happened, after all the years of belittling me, she thought I would just fall in line because she said so? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen, wondering why it still stung. Why did I still care? Why did it hurt that they had never once said they were sorry? But the answer came to me in a way I hadn't expected. I realized that my journey wasn't about waiting for their approval anymore. It was about me accepting myself for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. It was about shedding the layers of their expectations and finally standing tall in my own skin. A week later, my father called. I had been avoiding him, but I knew this call was inevitable. He was the one who had been silent for the longest, refusing to even acknowledge what had happened. "Rachel," he began, his voice strangely soft. "We've all been thinking a lot about everything. And I want you to know that we're sorry. Your mother didn't know how to handle things. We didn't know how to handle things." I could feel the hesitation in his words. My father had always been the more passive one, the one who let my mom run the show. This apology, even if it was late, felt like a step in the right direction. But I couldn't just forgive him. Not yet. Not without the acknowledgement that they had hurt me, deeply. "You're sorry for how you treated me, but not for what you said to me," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "You're sorry because you've been humiliated. You're sorry because the world is looking at us differently now. But where was your apology when I needed it?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "I'm not expecting you to understand," I continued. "But I need you to know that I've learned to live without you. I've learned to live for myself. And maybe one day, I'll be able to forgive you. But that has to come from me, not from your guilt." My father's voice cracked slightly. "I didn't mean for things to go this far. We've always been hard on you, but that's because we care. We just want the best for you." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "That's not love, Dad. That's control." And with that, I ended the call. Later that evening, I sat down in front of my laptop, staring at the screen. The internet had continued to buzz about my story, but something felt different now. I had gotten what I needed from the world. It wasn't fame, it wasn't validation. It was the freedom to be myself, unapologetically. As I clicked through the messages of support and the comments on my photos, I realized that this wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who had ever felt like they didn't belong, like they didn't measure up. It was about every woman who had been told to shrink herself, to hide her true self, just to make others comfortable. I had to speak up for myself, not just for the applause, but for the people who needed to see that it was possible to stand your ground, no matter who tried to tear you down. And maybe one day, my parents would come to understand that too. But until then, I would continue to be unapologetically me. As the weeks passed, I settled into a new rhythm. My professional life was thriving. I was becoming more and more involved with the boutique, working on exciting new designs, and making a name for myself in the fashion world. The recognition I had received from the media, the magazine feature, and the support from strangers continued to pour in. It was surreal, but there was still a lingering emptiness in my chest. I was doing well, but I had this unresolved tension with my family. I couldn't avoid them forever, but the thought of reconnecting felt daunting. Every time I thought about answering their calls, a wave of hesitation washed over me. They had hurt me so much, and now, I had to decide if I was ready to let them back into my life or if I was better off without them. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, sipping a cup of tea and scrolling through Instagram, I received a message that I wasn't expecting. It was from Amelia, my sister. "I know we haven't talked in a while, and I know things are strained with Mom and Dad," she wrote. "But I just wanted to say that I've been proud of you. What you did, standing up for yourself and being unapologetic about it, it's inspiring. I've always looked up to you, even when it didn't seem like I did. I don't want to lose you. Can we talk?" I blinked at the screen. Amelia had always been the good child, the one who never stepped out of line. She'd been the one my parents could count on to follow the rules, to keep things together. We were never particularly close, especially with the way my parents always pit us against each other, but seeing her reach out felt like a shift in the universe. Could she really understand? Could she really see what I'd been through? I paused before responding. The old me, the one that constantly sought validation from my family, wanted to immediately pour my heart out to her. But the new me, the one who had learned to stand strong and prioritize myself, was more cautious. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive them yet, I replied. But I appreciate you reaching out. I've had to learn how to live for myself and not for their approval. Her response came quickly, as if she'd been waiting for me to respond. I get it. I really do. But please know that I'm here for you. I don't want you to feel like you have to do it alone. There was a sincerity in her message that I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long time, I felt like Amelia wasn't just my sister by blood, she was someone who truly wanted to support me. It was strange, but it was also a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be room for healing in my family. I didn't call them, though. Not yet. I still wasn't ready to face the hurt they had caused. But something about Amelia's words made me feel less alone in this process. I could feel a faint sense of connection with her, a potential for something better. Days passed, and life moved forward. My work continued to flourish, and I started attending industry events, meeting other designers, and making connections. My social media following grew, and my confidence swelled. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally becoming the person I had always wanted to be, someone unapologetically bold, not afraid to stand out, not afraid to make waves. But then, one day, a message from my mom popped up on my phone. She had reached out several times before, but I had ignored her. This time, though, something about the message caught my eye. It wasn't the usual guilt-tripping or demands for me to come back. It was different. Rachel, I know I've hurt you. I know I haven't been the mother you needed. I'm sorry. Please, can we talk? I stared at the screen. Was this the moment I'd been waiting for? Was this the apology I needed to move on? I sat back in my chair, hands gripping the edge of my phone. I wanted to respond. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had broken me. But I also realized that I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the girl who needed her mother's approval to feel worthy. I had grown, and I had learned to find my strength in myself, not in their validation. I decided to take a deep breath and respond. I'm not sure what there is to talk about, Mom. You've had years to show me that you cared. I'm doing fine on my own. The response wasn't immediate, but when it came, I could sense the pain in her words. I don't know if I can fix what I've done. But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I was scared of losing you. I read her message multiple times. She was scared of losing me? But what about the years of rejection, the constant disappointment, the control she had tried to impose on me? Why hadn't she seen me before? I sighed, feeling a heaviness in my chest. It wasn't an apology that could undo the damage. But it was something. It was a crack in the wall, a sign that maybe my mom wasn't beyond change. Still, I wasn't ready to forgive her yet. Not fully. It would take time to process the hurt, time to understand the depth of what had happened. I had learned to be patient with myself, to give myself space to heal. And maybe, just maybe, I could allow that same patience for my family. As for Amelia, she kept in touch, offering support without pushing. She didn't try to force me to forgive our parents, but she did ask if I was okay. That simple gesture of kindness meant more to me than I could ever express. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, I sat down to a quiet dinner alone in my apartment. As I dug into the meal, I thought about how far I had come. I thought about how I had stood up for myself, how I had refused to shrink in front of those who couldn't see me for who I truly was. But I also thought about what was to come. The road to healing would not be easy. It would require more than just a few words from my parents. It would require actions. It would require them to understand that I wasn't the daughter they had imagined. I was someone entirely different, and that was okay. For now, I wasn't sure if I was ready to let them back into my life, but I knew one thing: I had come so far that I no longer needed them to define me. The future was wide open, and I was ready to walk down the path I had carved for myself. The days following my conversation with my mom were quiet. I focused on my work, my designs, and my growing career, which was starting to feel like the only thing that truly mattered. It was a bittersweet comfort, knowing I had control over one part of my life, even if everything else felt so uncertain. I could hear the noise of my phone buzzing in the background, messages from my parents, my aunt, even my sister, all trying to reach me. But I wasn't ready to deal with them. Not yet. One afternoon, while I was working on a new collection for the boutique, I received an unexpected message from an old family friend, someone who had always been in the background of our family events. His name was Carl. He had been a longtime business associate of my father and had always seemed kind, though distant. I had barely spoken to him in years, but his message caught my attention. "Rachel, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following your story and wanted to reach out. I've always admired your creativity and passion. I was wondering if you might be interested in a project I've been working on." I had no idea what he was talking about, but curiosity got the best of me. "What kind of project?" I replied. Carl quickly responded, "I've recently been in talks to buy the property your parents' company is operating from. I'd like to bring you on board as a lead designer. Your family has run that company for years, but I'm looking to take it in a new direction. I think you'd be perfect for the role." At first, I was shocked. Carl had always been close to my father's company, but I never expected him to make an offer like this. I hadn't thought about it much before, but the idea of being in control of my family's legacy, of taking charge of the company they had built, was intriguing. It wasn't just about the money or the position, it was about proving to them, to myself, that I could succeed in a world they had always tried to control. "I'm interested," I responded. "Let's set up a meeting." A week later, I sat down with Carl at a cafe in the city. He laid out his plans. He wanted to acquire the company, restructure it, and bring in new leadership. He was willing to make me the face of the brand, the one to take it to new heights. It was the ultimate opportunity, but there was one catch: Carl was still in the early stages of negotiations with my parents about selling the company. And once the deal went through, he made it clear that my parents would no longer have any say in the business. I left the meeting with a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about business, it was about reclaiming my power, about showing my parents that I didn't need them to succeed. I could make my own way, with or without their approval. Days later, Carl made an offer to buy the company, and much to my surprise, my parents accepted. It felt like they had finally given up on me, given up on their old ways of controlling everything, including their business. They didn't know, of course, that I was already in the mix, about to take over their legacy. The deal went through smoothly, and the following month, I walked into the company as its new head designer. I didn't tell my parents at first, not until the moment felt right. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. I immediately began implementing changes, revamping the designs, the marketing, everything. I was making the company my own, infusing it with my creativity, and finally taking it in the direction I had always dreamed of. Then, the inevitable happened. My parents called me one afternoon, their voices full of anger and confusion. "How could you do this to us?" my mother demanded. "You're destroying everything we built. How could you side with Carl of all people? We've given you everything." I could hear the frustration in their voices, but it no longer moved me. Their words didn't sting as they once did. "You've always wanted me to be someone I'm not. You've always held me back. This is my company now, and I'm taking it where it belongs." There was silence on the other end of the line. And then my father spoke, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You'll regret this. You'll never be able to make this business successful without us." I smiled to myself as I hung up the phone. It was the first time I didn't feel like I needed their approval. It was the first time I realized that I was stronger, more capable, and more determined than they had ever given me credit for. Over the next few months, the company began to thrive under my leadership. Sales soared, and the brand's new direction was a hit with the public. The media took notice, and before long, I was being interviewed for business magazines, asked to speak at conferences, and even offered opportunities to expand my designs into other industries. I was no longer the daughter trying to fit into a mold I didn't belong to. I was the force leading a successful company into the future. And then, one evening, during a company gala, I saw my parents for the first time since everything had gone down. They were standing across the room, looking uncomfortable, as if they didn't quite belong. I could see the realization in their eyes. This was my success, not theirs. The company they had once controlled was now mine, and they had no place in it anymore. I approached them, my heels clicking on the marble floor. My father's eyes widened as I got closer, his expression shifting from anger to something else I couldn't quite place. "Rachel," my mother said quietly, almost hesitantly. We didn't expect this." I nodded, feeling the weight of everything I had worked for. "You never did." For a moment, there was a tense silence between us. But I didn't feel the need to fill it with words. I had already said everything I needed to say. "I'm proud of what I've done. And I'm not sorry," I said firmly. "But this is my company now. You'll have to accept that." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, no longer in control of my life, my career, or my future. As I made my way to the stage to give my speech for the evening, I couldn't help but smile. This was it. The revenge wasn't about hurting them, it was about proving that I could succeed without them. I had taken the life they tried to control and turned it into my own. And that was the sweetest victory of all.